"How quaint," my sister Clara said, her voice dripping with contempt as she eyed my dusty overalls. I had just stepped off the red-eye from Nebraska and hadn't even had a chance to shower before being whisked off to the welcome dinner for my sister's posh New York wedding. Clara looked pristine as always in her designer dress and impeccable updo, sitting next to her smarmy fiancé Mark at the head of the long dining table. Mom shot me a weary look. We weren't accustomed to such finery, having lived simple farm lives back home. Dad stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. "It's just Clara's little joke," Mark said with an indulgent chuckle. "I think it's charming that Lena here helps out on the farm. Gets her hands dirty, doesn't she?" My face burned. I opened my mouth to respond, but Dad's hand on my arm stopped me. "Why don't you tell us about the farm, Lena?" Mark prompted. "Clara doesn't like to dwell on the past, but I'd love to hear how you spend your days." All eyes turned to me as I fumbled for words. Clara and Mark's wealthy friends waited expectantly, lips pursed as if poised to smirk at my unsophisticated life. "Well, we milk the cows every morning," I began. "By hand," a woman named Vivian cut in. "How precious." The table erupted into patronizing chuckles. Mom's eyes glistened. "Now, Vivian," Clara chided lightly, "we mustn't embarrass Lena. Not everyone can afford certain luxuries." My face burned hotter, but before I could respond, Dad slammed his fist on the table. "That's enough," he bellowed. The laughter died instantly. "We may not have your money, but we can sure as hell teach you a thing or two about decency." He stood abruptly and stormed out, Mom rushing after him. Clara didn't move, just swirled her wine glass lazily. "So dramatic," she sighed. "I suppose that's what happens when you waste your life in a rural backwater." Something in me snapped. "You think you're better than us?" I seethed through gritted teeth. "Let me tell you something. That farm put food on the table your whole damn childhood. It clothed you, kept a roof over your head, and this is the thanks Mom and Dad get?" Clara arched one carefully sculpted eyebrow. "It's not my fault they didn't aspire to anything more. I'm finally getting married into a respectable family." She ran a proprietary hand over Mark's chest. "I won't make the same mistakes." Mark raised his glass. "To upward mobility," he toasted. Their friends tittered appreciatively. I saw red. Before I could stop myself, I swept Clara's crystal champagne flute off the table. It shattered dramatically on the marble floor. "Lena!" Clara shrieked, leaping up from her seat. "No, Clara," I seethed through gritted teeth. "You don't get to look down on the people who sacrificed everything for you. It's time someone teach you a real lesson in humility." I spun on my heel and rushed out, leaving shocked gasps in my wake. My hands still trembled with rage as I comforted my distraught parents back in our small, shabby hotel room. Clara's cruelty had only steeled my resolve. If she refused to appreciate her family, I would make her. One way or another, before this wedding was over, my dear sister would finally pay for her arrogance. The next few days were a flurry of wedding preparations. With Clara caught up in the minutiae of floral arrangements, menu tastings, and dress fittings, I was relegated to the background, more servant than sister, expected to fetch and carry, while Clara basked in the glow of playing bride-to-be. She barely spoke 2 words to me that didn't involve an order or complaint. As I helped address invitation after endless invitation, Clara prattled on to her maids of honor about the preparations like a general planning a military offensive. "No, the table linens must be ivory, not ecru," she was saying now, exasperated. "Honestly, must I do everything myself?" I gritted my teeth as I continued scribbling names and addresses. Clara knew nothing of doing things herself. She'd never gotten her hands dirty in her life. "Oh, Lena, don't smudge the ink," Clara chided as she peered over my shoulder. "Hurry up with those. I need help addressing the place cards next." I slammed my pen down. "Actually, I think I'll take a break," I said coldly. Before she could protest, I was out the door. My blood boiled as I roamed the manicured grounds of the lavish Hamptons estate Clara and Mark had rented for the wedding. Everywhere I turned, more extravagance confronted me. The small fortune wasted on flowers, champagne, and decor could have funded our farm for a year. And for what? A gaudy show of wealth and status. Clara didn't appreciate the true value of family. She was marrying Mark for his money and influence in her new social circle. Well, I would make sure her facade came crashing down. I found my parents resting in the shade of a large oak tree, my dad's fingers interlaced with my mom's. Clara hardly had time for them either, brushing them off whenever they tried embracing their only other daughter. My resolve hardened. She would not get away with hurting them like this. I returned inside and quietly snuck into Mark's study. Rifling through the drawers, I found bank statements and investment reports. I pocketed a few. Evidence of Mark's shady financials would make for a handy reveal at the wedding reception. Next, I dug up Clara's day planner and snapped photos highlighting her pretentious schedules and social calendar. Let's see how her fancy friends feel knowing they're accessories to flaunt, not true companions. My phone buzzed. Speak of the devil. Where are you? Clara's shrill voice demanded. I'm not paying you to wander around all day. The place cards need addressing. I rolled my eyes. On my way, I said evenly before hanging up. I tucked the evidence safely into my bag. Soon, Clara, soon you'll wish you had treated your family better when you had the chance. The stage was set. My sister's arrogance would be her downfall. Over the next few days, my plan took shape. Clara's wedding would come crashing down in a blaze of exposed secrets and hypocrisy. I continued playing the role of dutiful sister in public, gritting my teeth through Clara's condescending barbs and imperious demands. But behind the scenes, I was gathering ammunition. My unlikely ally was the wedding planner, Samantha. We had instantly bonded over our shared frustration with Clara's tyrannical behavior. 200 roses in the centerpieces aren't enough. Apparently we need 300, Samantha fumed. Does she think money grows on trees? Want to take her down a peg? I asked casually. Samantha raised her eyebrows. What did you have in mind? Let's just say the wedding photos won't be quite as Pinterest perfect as Clara expects. A slow grin spread across Samantha's face. I'm listening. We plotted in hushed whispers when Clara wasn't around. Samantha recruited other vendors who'd been subjected to Clara's wrath, including the florist, the band, and the caterer. One glimpse of Mark's shady financial records had been enough to convince them. Piece by piece, I collected candid photos and video clips capturing Clara and Mark's true, arrogant, and conceited nature. A lifetime of pent-up resentment fueled me. My parents noticed a change in my demeanor and cornered me one afternoon in the garden. You seem distracted, honey, Mom said, worry creasing her brow. What are you planning? Dad asked outright. I sighed. No point hiding it from them. Don't worry, I said cryptically. I'm going to make sure Clara finally pays for looking down on this family. Dad frowned, but Mom squeezed my hand and nodded. Just be careful, she whispered. I knew they were hurting as much as I was. It was time to take a stand. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I snuck into the banquet hall early to meet with the staff. As we discussed logistics, I saw red lipstick smudged on a half-empty champagne glass on the head table. Interesting. I showed the photo to Samantha, whose eyes narrowed. That little of snake, she muttered. I always knew she was cheating. It was almost too perfect. Clara's sweet facade hid a rotten core. At the dinner, I surreptitiously filmed as she introduced Mark to her friends, fawning over him for show while flashing her alleged lover coy looks across the room. Gotcha. Afterwards, I added the evidence to my growing dossier. Clara's wedding was about to become a one-way ticket to public humiliation. Let's see how her elite circle reacted when they realized they'd been cozying up to a fraud. By the time I was done, Clara's reputation would be in tatters, and my family would finally have its revenge. The day before the wedding, I woke up filled with purpose. Today would involve neutralizing potential obstacles before executing my plan to humiliate Clara tomorrow. My first stop was the boutique where Clara was having her final dress fitting. I needed to get rid of her loyal minion and maid of honor, Jen. I found Jen sipping mimosas. Time to sow some doubt. Jen, I exclaimed, just who I wanted to see. I can't thank you enough for being Clara's rock through all this chaos. Jen preened. Of course I'd do anything for her. We've been best friends since college. Exactly, I said conspiratorially. Can I tell you something in confidence, as her sister? Jen leaned in eagerly. I'm worried about Clara and Mark, I said, feigning concern. Their relationship seems so transactional, you know? I even saw Mark getting cozy with another woman. Jen's eyes went wide. No, Clara said they're soulmates. She's dreamed of this wedding her whole life. I shook my head. I'm telling you as her sister, something seems off. Just keep your eyes open, okay? I'd hate to see Clara get hurt. Planting those seeds was all it took. By the time Clara finished her dress fitting, Jen was nowhere to be found. One down. Next was Mark himself. I found him reviewing seating charts. Showtime. Hey sis, Mark grinned smugly. Come to check everything meets your quaint standards? I ignored the jab. Actually, I wanted to apologize. I may have given folks the wrong impression about you. Mark blinked in surprise but quickly composed himself. Really? I appreciate that, Lena. Now to cast doubt. I can tell how much you love and respect Clara, I said, laying it on thick. All those fancy investors she's introducing you to, you'd never take advantage, right? Mark's eyes narrowed slightly before he laughed. Of course not. I'm all about family. He was a worse actor than I thought. Luckily, it didn't matter. Mark could now see me as a potential threat. Finally, I had to sabotage Clara's preparations. I found her sipping champagne while having her makeup done. Clara, you should reconsider those centerpieces, I said casually. White lilies would look so much better than roses. As expected, she flared up instantly. Excuse me? I picked ivory roses months ago. I shrugged. Oops, my mistake. Too late to change them, I guess. Clara's brow furrowed. Good. A tiny seed of superstitious doubt planted. She was too focused on bridezilla details to see the bigger picture. Everything was in place for the main event. Just one more day before Clara's entire facade collapsed. My pulse quickened. After tomorrow, my family would finally have justice. The night before Clara's wedding, I could hardly sleep, too wired with anticipation for the coming day. In the darkness, I reviewed the damning evidence against my sister one final time. The credit card statements proving Mark's shady business deals. Testimonials from mistreated wedding vendors eager for payback. Even Clara's own petty commentary against her nearest and dearest. I had it all. At dawn, I slipped out to the garden to watch the sunrise. Today was Judgment Day. My thoughts were interrupted by footsteps on the gravel behind me. I whirled around to see Clara standing there in her silk robe, arms crossed. Well, what are you hiding? She demanded. Of course, she must have noticed my repeated whispered conversations and furtive movements these past days. I quickly composed myself. Just wedding jitters, I said lightly. I want everything to go perfectly for you, sis. Clara's eyes narrowed. I don't believe you. Spill it. When I stayed silent, her face flushed with rage. She grabbed my arm roughly. Tell me what you're planning right now, she hissed, all pretense of civility gone. Behind the mask of the polished socialite lurked my sister's real petty, domineering nature. I wrenched my arm from her grasp. Take your hands off me, I spat. I don't answer to you. We stood there, eyes locked, the growing dawnlight illuminating Clara's reddening face. Have it your way, she said coldly. But if you ruin things for me, I'll make you pay. I stepped close until we were nose to nose. Too late for that, I said quietly. You've been the one making Mom and Dad pay your whole life. It ends today. I stormed off before she could respond, adrenaline coursing through me. Only a few more hours now. My expose would ruin Clara socially and financially. Let's see how her so-called friends reacted when they realized she was a shallow, materialistic fraud. She deserved it after a lifetime of looking down on us. I almost wished I could see her reaction when it happened, the dawning humiliation and panic as her facade collapsed. But I couldn't risk being caught prematurely. I would be far away by the time Clara's world came crashing down. Until then, I had to play it cool. Clara's suspicions meant I needed an ironclad alibi when things went down at the reception. Luckily, Jen was easy enough to manipulate. A few vague hints about concerns regarding Clara was enough to provoke an epic meltdown. Right on schedule, Jen barged into Clara's suite, sobbing about duplicity and betrayal. While Clara desperately tried to salvage her closest friendship before walking down the aisle, I made my escape. I had an important video to prepare and send anonymously when the time was right. Soon, Clara, your judgment day is at hand. Get ready to reap what you've sown. The day of Clara's wedding dawned bright and clear. Inside, however, a storm was brewing. As Clara glided down the aisle on my father's arm, smiling radiantly, I maintained a pleasant facade. But inside, my heart hammered with anticipation. The ceremony proceeded smoothly. If Clara suspected anything amiss, she hid it well behind her practiced porcelain smile. At last, it was time. As waiters began circulating with champagne at the reception, I slipped away to make the call. Moments later, the projector flickered on, casting an enlarged video onto the blank wall behind the head table. For one blissful moment, Clara's smile persisted, oblivious. Then chaos erupted. On screen, grainy footage showed Mark kissing a woman who was distinctly not my sister. Gasps and shouts filled the air as all eyes turned to the front. Clara's pristine smile had frozen, lips parted in horror. Mark lunged for the projector, but shoved him back into his seat. "You lying piece of filth!" The raw fury in her voice was terrifying to behold. "How dare you?" Mark stammered meaningless denials, but Clara was no longer listening. Her burning glare turned to the crowd who watched, transfixed and murmuring. "As for the rest of you backstabbing vipers," she seethed, "let's see how you like hearing what I really think of you all." With that, the video changed to show Clara at the bridal boutique, trash-talking guests by name. "Charles acts so enlightened, but he slept with half of Manhattan." "Oh, please. We all know Alexandra bought her way into the symphony board." "That cow Vivian is just obsessed with me." It went on, Clara mercilessly shredding apart the facade of polite society and so-called friendships. I watched, transfixed, as these arrogant snobs reacted with slack-jawed shock at her vitriol. Murmurs turned to outraged shouts. "How could you?" Vivian cried, aghast. "I thought we were friends." Alexandra stood abruptly. "I won't stand here and listen to these lies." She stormed away, others moving to follow. The tableau of Clara's public evisceration was even sweeter than I imagined. I drank it in, watching with quiet satisfaction as her privileged world crumbled to dust, until Clara's wild gaze fixed on me. In 2 strides she crossed the space between us and struck me hard across the face. "You!" she snarled. "I should have known you'd try to ruin everything, you jealous little—" Whatever she planned to say next was lost as Mark grabbed her arm and snapped, "Enough!" To the remaining guests, he announced, "The wedding is off." Gasps rippled through the room. In the ensuing stunned silence, Mark turned on his heel and walked away. Clara stood motionless amid the ruins of her sham marriage and reputation. Her eyes met mine one final time, burning with impotent rage. Then she turned and fled. It was over. I had my revenge at last. Clara finally knew how it felt to have her world humiliated and exposed without mercy. For a moment, I thought I would feel triumphant. Instead, as I gazed out at the destruction I had wrought, an empty sadness overcame me. This was justice, but not redemption. My sister was not the only one with lessons to learn. As Clara's ruined wedding lay in ashes around me, I realized my own path forward remained unclear. In the chaotic aftermath of Clara's ruined wedding, I slipped away unnoticed. I knew she would come looking for me soon, crazed with anger and humiliation. Sure enough, I had just reached my room when Clara burst through the door, eyes ablaze. "You!" She advanced on me, hand raised to strike again. "I want you gone. Your petty jealousy has cost me everything." I stood my ground. "Look closer, Clara. I'm not the one who brought this on yourself." "Don't you dare," she shrieked. I was finally becoming someone, marrying into a good family, not like the nobodies we come from. Her words stung, but I held firm. "Is that all that matters to you? Status and money? What about finding real meaning in life?" Clara let out a hollow, bitter laugh. "Don't lecture me about meaning. Real life isn't some quaint middle American fantasy. I thought you were jealous of my perfect life." "Perfect?" I spat back. "It was a sham built on deceit and vanity." Clara flinched at the harsh truth. For a moment her haughty mask slipped, revealing the scared, insecure girl within, but then her eyes hardened again. "Get out," she hissed, blind fury returning. "I never want to see you again." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there shaking, the weight of what I had destroyed hitting me. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. It was Samantha, the wedding planner. Her smile was bittersweet. "Quite a day, huh?" she said wryly. "I'm almost sorry it's over." I let out a shaky laugh. "It's for the best. Clara needs to change." Samantha nodded. "Hopefully she learns her lesson. And what about you?" I looked away. I didn't regret exposing Clara, but doubts were creeping in. "I need time to think," I said quietly. Samantha squeezed my shoulder. "Whenever you're ready, there are good people waiting." With that, she left. I wish I shared her optimism. Clara was right. I had been jealous of her seemingly perfect life. I realized now no life is perfect, only meaningful if lived with humility and compassion. The path forward would not be easy for either of us. But as I watched Clara's borrowed Bentley disappear down the gravel driveway, this time for good, I knew one thing was certain. Our sibling relationship was shattered forever. For better or worse, things would never be the same again. In the weeks following Clara's failed wedding, the gossip rags had a field day, mocking Manhattan's runaway bride. Her picture graced their covers for a week straight before some other society scandal took over. I read the headlines with a sort of numb ambivalence. I had wanted to see Clara humbled and brought low, yet now that she was, I felt neither vindication nor satisfaction, only sadness for what our family had become. My parents tiptoed around me, unsure what to say after everything that had happened. The unspoken distance between us was worse than any lecture. 2 weeks later, I still hadn't left New York. I kept replaying the sequence of events in my head, wishing I could unravel the tangled knot of sisterhood, jealousy, and retribution that had led us here. One day, as I wandered aimlessly through Central Park, my thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Lena, is that you?" I turned in surprise to see Samantha hurrying towards me, beaming. In spite of myself, I smiled back. Samantha's warm caring was a balm amidst the emotional wreckage. We fell easily into conversation, strolling together around the pond as she caught me up on wedding gossip. Finally, she paused, expression growing serious. "Forgive me for prying, but you seem burdened," she said gently. "Have you reconciled with Clara yet?" I let out a harsh, brittle laugh. "Clara and I are done. She'll never forgive me." Samantha squeezed my shoulder. "She will, in time, when she's ready to change." I shook my head bitterly. "Clara won't change who she is. I need to accept that." "But you can change who you are," Samantha said. "Leave jealousy and pettiness behind. Forgive others and yourself." Her words resonated within me. I had always thought Clara was the problem in our relationship. Only now did I see my own flaws clearly. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I saw a chance to let go of resentment and embrace empathy. My soul felt lighter than it had in years. I turned and hugged Samantha fiercely. "Thank you," I whispered. "I think I'm finally ready to go home." The next morning, I bid my parents a loving goodbye, promising to visit soon. As I boarded my flight back, the possibilities of the future stretched out ahead of me, rewritten. I didn't know if Clara would ever let go of her anger, but I could let go of mine. That was change enough for now. The wheels lifted off, leaving behind the weight of my sisterly grudge. When I returned home, there was a lightness in my step that hadn't been there before. Who knew what life held next? For today, I was simply grateful for the wisdom I had found and the compassion I now carried within.
In this riveting narrative, Jessica, a woman who has endured years of abuse at the hands of her husband Nicholas, makes a courageous decision to escape with her son John in pursuit of a safer and happier life. Their journey leads them to an abandoned house nestled in the woods, where they encounter Thomas, a man with his own troubled past. As Jessica and Thomas share their harrowing stories, an unspoken bond forms between them, offering hope and protection. Meanwhile, Nicholas, consumed by rage, embarks on a vengeful quest to track down his fleeing wife. This compelling tale promises to delve into themes of survival, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative power of newfound love. To stay updated on this gripping exploration, be sure to subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and leave your comments. And now, we enter the next chapter of Jessica's story. Jessica anxiously waited for Nicholas to drive out of the yard before springing into action. She hurriedly entered her son John's room, urging him to prepare for their imminent departure. Tearfully, John questioned their destination, to which Jessica replied with uncertainty. "I don't know yet, John. Just somewhere far away from here." As mother and son swiftly gathered essentials, a palpable sense of urgency hung in the air. John, looking up at his mother, asked, "Mom, are we going to get away from Daddy, so he won't hurt you anymore?" With determination in her eyes, Jessica reassured him, "Yes, sweetheart. We just have to hurry and get as far away as possible while he's gone. Mommy, are you sure he won't find us?" "We'll do our best, John. When he does find us, we'll be safe," Jessica whispered as she packed a backpack with only the essentials. Taking out her passport and her son's papers, she intentionally left her cell phone behind, knowing Nicholas could use it to track them. Jessica's financial dependence on Nicholas complicated their escape. He controlled everything, from the money to her ability to work. The once seemingly reliable and good Nicholas had revealed his true colors after John's birth, becoming an abusive force in their lives. As the abuse escalated, Jessica's hope for a better future diminished, and she finally decided it was time to escape. The catalyst for their flight was a brutal incident where Nicholas, in a fit of rage, not only beat Jessica, but also struck John. It was the breaking point for Jessica. Realizing they needed to escape before things worsened, she planned to file for divorce and established a new life before Nicholas could locate them. As they left the cottage village, Jessica and John walked briskly toward the bus stop. However, at the last moment, Jessica changed her mind, opting to catch the bus elsewhere. As they reached the edge of the forest, memories flooded back of a time they had run through these woods, emerging on the other side of town. An hour later, a significant chapter in their journey awaited them. They boarded the bus, exhausted yet content. Without bothering to check its destination, they traveled a short distance. 4 stops initially, and then a few more. Now they found themselves at a gazebo-marked stop, surrounded by emptiness. Jessica overheard the bus mentioning that the village wasn't far, a pleasant journey through the woods taking about 15 minutes or a road trip lasting 30 to 40 minutes. Driven by weariness, they moved towards the forest. The need for shelter and rest became apparent. Jessica planned to approach someone for assistance, spend a peaceful night, and then figure out their next steps. However, the forest thickened, growing taller and darker. As dusk approached, Jessica contemplated spending the night in the woods. To her relief, the forest eventually gave way to a clearing, revealing a solitary house. Large, well-built, but seemingly abandoned. Curiosity mixed with caution, Jessica and John approached the house. Despite its exterior appearance, the inside was surprisingly orderly. Jessica decided against disturbing anything, acknowledging the possibility of an owner. They ate the sandwiches from home, and John, exhausted, drifted into a deep sleep. While lying awake, Jessica listened to the unfamiliar night sounds. However, a disturbing dream gripped her, fading as she awoke to an unsettling noise, the refrigerator door opening. Panic set in as she noticed a light emanating from the kitchen, unnoticed before. Jessica, sensing a potential threat, faced the dilemma of negotiating their safety or attempting to leave unnoticed. She stood up slowly, surveying the situation, and then looked at her sleeping son. The kitchen door swung open, revealing a big man with a beard and goggle eyes, about a decade older than her. Realizing her predicament, Jessica pleaded, "Please forgive us. We thought the house was abandoned, and we just got lost. We'll leave as soon as it's light." The man, seemingly amused, closed the door partially, allowing him to observe John. Concerned for her safety, Jessica stepped forward cautiously, admitting they were lost and telling her story. The man, introduced as Thomas, listened attentively, and Jessica, realizing the importance of honesty, shared her narrative without reservation. In that moment, she recognized the necessity of escaping her past much earlier. Thomas, intrigued, prompted her to continue when she finished. He inquired, "I understand correctly, you have nowhere to go." Jessica nodded, "Yes, but don't worry, we'll leave in the morning." He smirked again, his blue eyes meeting hers. "Where to, if it's no secret?" "To some village. We'll ask for a place to stay. And maybe I'll find some work in the village," Jessica replied hesitantly. He chuckled. "What's wrong? If you don't know, there hasn't been a job in the village for 15 years. Well, go to bed. I'll sleep in the room. There's the door. Tomorrow we'll think about it, and tonight we'll rest." He turned around but quickly returned, handing her a blanket. "Here, take a blanket. It'll be chilly by morning, freeze the baby." Jessica accepted the blanket and went to the bed where John was sleeping. Strangely, her soul felt calmed, fear replaced by a newfound sense that they were not alone, that they were protected. In the morning, Jessica woke up with the sun already high. John was not in bed. Panic gripped her momentarily until she saw her son outside with Thomas. cleaning up the rows of cut grass. John was smiling and chatting with Thomas as if they had known each other for ages. Jessica stepped onto the porch. "Good morning." John beamed. "Mommy, you're up." "Mom, you have no idea. Uncle Thomas promised to take me fishing." Jessica anxiously looked at her son. "What fishing trip?" "We have to keep going, Mom. Can't we stay a few days? Uncle Thomas says we can stay." Thomas approached. "You're not in a hurry, are you? Your boy's never been fishing in his life." Jessica wanted to protest, but she held back. Thomas sighed. "John and I have already had breakfast, but we probably won't say no to tea." As Jessica prepared breakfast and lunch, Thomas and John took care of tasks outside. When she stepped out, she was astounded. The once overgrown house and yard were now neat and tidy. Thomas explained, "There's no place for the child to play ball, and there might be a snake lurking in the grass." He took out a beautiful ball from the barn and said, "Let's get you a gate, John. I can't play with you all the time." In the evening, after John fell asleep, Jessica and Thomas sat down in the kitchen to drink tea. Curious, Jessica asked, "Thomas, if you don't want to answer, I understand. But still, what are you doing here? You don't look like a countryman." Thomas smiled. "It didn't work out, did it? Oh, I tried so hard. My story is as banal as yours. My wife cheated on me with my best friend." Jessica gasped. "You killed them, and now you're hiding." Thomas looked at her in surprise, then laughed. "What a fantasy. No, I didn't kill anyone. I was just too hurt by the double betrayal to take a break. So I arrived here. This house used to be my grandfather's. He was a forester here," Thomas said, a touch of sadness in his smile. "It's good to have a place to hide. I don't have a place." "Then stay. There's plenty of room for everyone. It's not far. A 10-minute walk from the village. I'll show you," he offered. Jessica didn't say anything. It all sounded promising, but living without money seemed impossible. They would eat Thomas's food, and then what? A week passed quickly, then another. One day, Jessica approached Thomas. "Thomas, how long can we sit on your neck? I have to do something. I have to find a place to go, a place to work, a place to live. You can't babysit us all the time." Meanwhile, John was doing well, putting the ball in the goal, oblivious to their conversation. Thomas replied, "It's not like I'm chasing you, but I totally understand. Why don't we all go back to the city together? I've got a big apartment. You can have your own room while you get settled." Jessica looked at him fearfully, but that's where Nicholas is. "Exactly. Are you going to spend the rest of your life hiding from him in the woods? That's not the point. What about John? He's going to school this year. He needs to socialize with his peers." 3 days later, they moved back to the town with Thomas. Jessica wasn't sure if it was the right decision, but Thomas was telling the truth. She couldn't spend her whole life in hiding. When Jessica had initially shared her story with Thomas that first night in the forest home, she hadn't gone into detail about Nicholas's abuse. However, when they lived together, she opened up about the extent of the torment. Thomas clenched his fists, white-knuckled with rage, vowing never to let Nicholas harm Jessica or John again. That night, Jessica cried in Thomas's arms, releasing years of humiliation and fear. She felt lighter and calmer, knowing she now had a guardian angel in Thomas. Over time, John and Thomas grew close. In the city, they spent quality time together, as Thomas promised, taking John fishing and teaching him valuable life skills. They went on camping and fishing trips, forming a strong male friendship. Nicholas eventually found Jessica a few months later, but by then, Jessica had a newfound support system in Thomas. She loved it so much that she filed for divorce as soon as she arrived. Thomas was far from poor. He had his own business, and although it was a big apartment, they didn't see each other much because Thomas was often away at work. Jessica ran to the store and bought some fish. Thomas gave her money for household expenses, which she thought was too much, but he laughed, saying that he spent a lot more on dinners in restaurants because he couldn't cook. She was almost to the driveway when a familiar voice called out to her, "Jessica, wait a minute." She stumbled, terror sweeping over her. She recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to her husband, Nicholas. Jessica slowly turned around. Nicholas stood next to her, his eyes narrowed, indicating an intense level of rage. "Why are you acting so bad, wifey, or have you relaxed? Didn't I bring you up enough?" He clenched his fists, and Jessica squirmed, covering her face with her hands. She heard some kind of slap, then a loud thud, but there was no punch. Cautiously, she opened her eyes. Nicholas was lying on the ground, with Thomas towering over him. "Remember, weakling, if I ever see you near her or Jan again, I will bury you in the asphalt. You got it? Who are you? Who the hell are you?" Thomas pulled out a business card and shoved it into Nicholas's pocket. "I'm the man who will keep them safe forever." He turned around, took the bag from Jessica's hands, and pushed her toward the entryway. Jessica walked and smiled. She had such hope. She was even afraid to admit to herself that she had fallen in love with Thomas. "Like the girl in front of the door," he asked. "When's the divorce?" "In 5 days. We have to get married, you realize?" Thomas spoke in a long and rambling voice. Jessica turned to him and gave him a quick kiss. "I agree." Thomas looked up, frozen, then asked, "And you won't be disgusted to live with me? I'm talking about real life." Jessica laughed. "How could it be disgusting with someone you love, Tom?" Thomas was a little confused, then dropped the package and picked her up in his arms. "Are you serious? I didn't even dare to dream of such a thing." Shortly after, Jessica and Thomas married. They had a daughter named Anna, and John, now a big brother, was very proud. Nicholas didn't cause any more problems. It seemed he had found a new victim and was now preoccupied with her. Jessica continued to work, coming home to her loving husband and 2 children. Thomas tried to spend as much time with his family as possible. When John went to school, he made many friends, and Thomas and Jessica enjoyed watching their son grow up to be a healthy and fun-loving child. A few years later, another son was born to them. Now both the baby and Anna ran after their older brother, and John willingly played with them. Jessica thanked fate for this new life full of love and family warmth. Next to Thomas, she truly blossomed and believed in herself and her strength. After Nicholas ran into Thomas at Jessica's doorstep, he didn't show up for a while. A couple of months later, Jessica happened to see him on the street. Nicholas was walking with his arm around a skinny girl in her 20s. Jessica realized, from her frightened look, that this poor girl had fallen into the clutches of a tyrant and a domestic abuser. Jessica and Thomas had seen Nicholas several times with different women. Apparently, he would find a victim, marry her, and then, when she ran away, look for the next unfortunate one. When John grew up, Jessica once talked to him about his former father. It turned out he tried to get in touch with his son a couple of times, but John stayed away from the guy. He loved his real dad, Thomas. The last time they heard from Nicholas was about 5 years ago. They say he married some rich widow. I guess he got lucky, and now he may not be looking for another victim, but just enjoying life at her expense. After Nicholas married the rich widow, he was happy at first. Finally, life was getting better, no money problems, no need to work, just enjoying himself. However, over time, it turned out that his new spouse was an overbearing, dominant woman who constantly humiliated and insulted Nicholas, forcing him to fulfill humiliating whims. He tolerated all her antics because she made a will in his favor. Therefore, Nicholas hoped to endure and, after her death, get a rich inheritance. For the sake of this, he was ready to bear any humiliation from his own wife. However, in the end, such a life broke Nicholas. He drank himself to sleep, almost lost his mind from constant abuse, and then the widow changed her mind, amending the will and depriving her husband of the right of inheritance. In the end, Nicholas was left with nothing. The cruel, dominant spouse threw him out on the street, taking all his money and property. The boomerang of his misdeeds came back and ruined Nicholas's own life. As John grew older, it was hard for him to realize and believe what his own father, Nicholas, had once done. He heard stories from his mom about the beatings and humiliations she suffered from this cruel and heartless man. John couldn't understand how it was possible to beat and torture his own wife, the mother of his child. When John was about 12 years old, Jessica carefully told him about the incident when Nicholas had hit him, a little boy, and how he had thrown him to the corner of the room when John had stood up for his mom. Goosebumps ran down John's spine at the realization of that horror and pain. He couldn't believe for a long time that it was his own father doing that. A man who was supposed to love, protect, and defend his family, but instead caused them unbearable suffering. John was truly grateful to fate that he had another man by his side now. His dad, Thomas, sensitive, responsive, and so dear. It was him that John considered a real father and role model. When they were already a happy and friendly family, Jessica suggested that they go together to that abandoned cabin in the woods where they had once found shelter. The whole family happily agreed. They arrived in the woods, found a clearing with a house that looked abandoned as well. Stepping inside, Jessica and Thomas felt nostalgic, remembering their first meeting. For the boys, it was an exciting adventure to spend the night as a family in an old house in the middle of the woods. They listened with delight to their parents' stories about those events, how Mom and Dad met and fell in love. In those days, there was an atmosphere of unity, warmth, and love in the forest. In the evenings, everyone sat around the fire, baked sausages, told stories, and played games. One day, a thunderstorm suddenly began. Heavy clouds covered the sky, a strong wind blew, and then there was a real hurricane. It seemed that the old house was about to collapse from the gusts of wind. Thunder rumbled, lightning flashed. The children huddled fearfully around their parents, but Thomas was not confused. He calmed everyone down and took them to the safest room in the house. Then he boarded up the windows and doors to keep the drafts out. When the storm subsided a little, Thomas lit the fireplace, and the house became cozy. Thomas got chocolate, marshmallows, and flashlights out of his backpack. They had an impromptu picnic right on the living room floor. The kids were so grateful to Thomas. Thanks to his resourcefulness and courage, everyone stayed safe and sound. Now the story of how the head of the family saved everyone has become a family legend. The story of the hurricane. Once again, it clearly demonstrated to Jessica the fundamental difference between Thomas and her ex-husband Nicholas. In a critical situation, Nicholas only swore and blamed everyone around him. He never sacrificed his comfort for the well-being of his family. Thomas, on the other hand, did not hesitate to risk himself to shelter and save his loved ones. He acted decisively and rationally. His coolness and resourcefulness were admirable. After everything that had happened, Jessica was firmly convinced that with Thomas, she and the children would be safe. With him, they could survive any hardships and storms because he is a real man, a pillar of safety and security for the family. When compared to spineless Nicholas, it's just night and day. With Thomas, Jessica found real peace of mind, love, and care. She thanked fate for this meeting every day. This trip brought the whole family together even more. When they returned home, rested and happy, they remembered this unforgettable adventure for a long time and thanked the abandoned house that had once been the beginning of their new family. One day, my husband approached me and inquired, "Hey, how much money do we have in that safe?" I couldn't help but chuckle and replied, probably around $500,000 in total. Now, the following day, upon returning home, I discovered a signed divorce paper on the living room table. Both my husband and the vault were gone. My name is Helen, a 58-year-old working housewife who still puts in diligent effort at my job. You see, my hobby is saving money. Ever since my childhood, my mother opened a savings account for me, teaching me that depositing money in the bank would make the numbers in my passbook grow. I found it incredibly enjoyable to witness this growth. Starting with just $1, I would deposit a little bit at a time, relishing the experience of watching it accumulate. As my savings grew over the years, earning a few cents in interest annually became a delightful surprise to my younger self. With a fondness for money and understanding how it works, I pursued a career as a financial planner, offering advice on asset management. One day, a college friend approached me concerned about an old childhood friend who was in serious trouble due to debt. They asked if I could offer some advice, and intrigued, I agreed to meet with him. This friend, named Mark, was a handsome man with a refreshing smile. He shared his story, confessing his love for gambling and the struggles he faced in making ends meet. Feeling sympathetic, I offered Mark some guidance. Given his precarious financial situation, I advised him to consolidate his debts and reduce his monthly payments to better manage his life. As my friend had asked for my help, I willingly lent a hand. Looking back now, I realized that perhaps I had developed a slight crush on Mark during our interactions. Little did I know that this would lead to a series of troublesome events. Against the advice of my friend, Mark and I decided to get married, believing that our union would help us face his debts together. Due to my stable income and financial expertise, most of Mark's income went towards paying off his debt. I made sure he severed ties with his parents to prevent the debt from escalating. Additionally, I provided Mark with a monthly allowance of $500. However, when Mark decided to cut ties with his parents, they responded with anger and resentment. His mother labeled him an ungrateful child, regretting ever giving birth to him. His father too expressed his discontent, desiring to confront me for what he considered thieving behavior. It was clear that they believed Mark belonged to them as a means to repay their debts. Exhausted from dealing with his parents' debt for so long, Mark finally stood up for himself, declaring he was not their ATM. He returned to me, feeling relieved to be free from their constant reminders of the financial burden. Soon after, we welcomed a son, Kevin, who bore a striking resemblance to Mark. Kevin became my pride and joy, but unfortunately, he inherited his father's lack of discipline and indecisiveness. Just as our son noticed Mark's carefree character, he also observed the never-ending cycle of borrowing money from predatory lenders, dealing with loan sharks, and tricking friends into lending him money for gambling. Our journey was not without its challenges, but I managed to keep Mark on track. Over the span of 23 years, we gradually reduced Mark's debt to around $10,000, nearing full repayment. One day, while on the verge of achieving our financial goal, Mark received a call from his parents. They informed him that his father had collapsed and was at the hospital. Concerned, Mark left work early to be by his parents' side. He messaged me, apologizing for breaking our promise and explaining the situation. I encouraged him to go and comfort his parents, assuring him it was all right. As Mark continued visiting his parents at the hospital, I provided him with a little extra money for the hospital fees they couldn't afford. It seemed my in-laws were struggling financially and relying on Mark for support. Although he withdrew a significant amount from our joint funds each visit, around $1,000 to $2,000 per month, I chose to let it slide, understanding their need for assistance. A year had passed since my father-in-law's collapse, and both my in-laws had aged significantly. They sought someone to lean on, and I suppose they found comfort in Mark's presence. Meanwhile, I continued my hobby of saving money. One day, I retrieved my bank book from the vault and smiled. Mark, who usually showed no interest in my financial endeavors, looked at me and asked, "Hey, how much money do we have in that bank account you always look at so happily?" I casually replied, "It's about $500,000 now." However, the next morning, I discovered divorce papers completed and left in the living room. Both Mark and the safe were gone. As I sat there having breakfast, I couldn't help but smile. I knew Mark had his eyes on the money in the vault, and he had planned to take it all. Imagining him attempting to carry the entire vault nearly made me burst out laughing. In our home, we had a black cat named Luna. We had installed a pet camera to watch Luna's adorable antics, which served as healing moments throughout my day. Luna provided a sense of comfort amid the unexpected turn of events. While watching the pet camera during my lunch breaks, I was always greeted by the adorable sight of my child. But one day, as I switched on the camera, something unexpected unfolded in our living room. My in-laws and my husband Mark engaged in an unbelievable conversation. "Oh, you live in such a nice house, Mark. Your good salary makes your mother so proud," they flattered him. Mark's father responded proudly, "Indeed, I make a decent salary myself. However, Helen takes it all, and I'm left with a mere allowance of $500 a month." "Are you kidding me? That's outrageous. You should be getting more," they exclaimed, sympathizing with Mark. "Why do you obey such a tyrant like Helen? You could live a much better life on your own," they continued. "Mark, you're our pride. You could have saved hundreds of thousands by now. But she's exploiting you? Poor thing." They manipulated him. Listening to their conversation, I wondered if they had completely forgotten that I had worked hard to pay off Mark's debts. I pondered what was going on in their heads. In the past, it was Mark burdened with debt from his parents, and I had to provide them with cash every month, making it challenging for us to get by. "Did you know she has a bank book with tons of savings? It's not fair that you only get $500. Mark complained, and in that moment, my in-laws' eyes lit up. They exchanged glances and eagerly leaned in, awaiting Mark's response. Last I heard, I think it was around $400,000 or $500,000, Mark answered. "Mark, isn't that money rightfully yours?" they asked, trying to persuade him. "It may not match the effort you've put in, but shouldn't you be receiving that money?" "Yeah, I guess you're right. I'm starting to think the same thing," Mark conceded. Despite his good looks, Mark was easily influenced and indecisive. In the past, I found this endearing and wholeheartedly devoted myself to him. However, it seemed he was being manipulated by his parents once again, and they were about to touch my precious savings. Witnessing this scene was incredibly painful. Tears streamed down my face as I sat at my desk at work, holding my phone. For the past 23 years, I had diligently set aside my own living expenses from Mark's income, primarily using it to pay off our debt. On top of that, I provided him with a $500 allowance from my own pocket. Despite explaining this to Mark, it appeared he had completely forgotten what the past 23 years had been for. I felt a deep sadness and pitifulness, as if I were drowning in my own tears in that moment. I made the decision to record the conversation and promptly sent the data to my son. Claiming sickness, I left work early and headed to my regular bar, where I drowned my sorrows in alcohol. Pouring out my heart to the bartender, he gently comforted me, saying, "Why do you grieve for someone like that? You've done nothing wrong. There's no need to live for them. Live for yourself." In that moment, my love for my husband and my intoxication faded away. "Thank you, sir. Next time, we'll share a pleasant dream," I said to the bartender before leaving. Returning home, I entered my study and began devising a plan to retrieve the bank book from the safe. I couldn't fathom how to accomplish it, but I was determined to show them hell. They should never underestimate me. Concentrating harder than ever, I knew that gathering evidence was the first step. From that day on, I diligently checked the pet camera every day, and slowly, the ugly truths began to surface. Instead of the woman my husband was having an affair with, my in-laws started appearing on the camera in our house. They were discussing their plan to take the bank book from me. "Is everything arranged to take that bank book from Helen?" they asked, grinning unpleasantly. "You're smart. You must have thought of something, right?" "Yeah, I have a plan. I'm thinking of taking the entire vault." "It'll be easy," Mark responded confidently. "But the safe is quite heavy." "Are you sure you can handle it?" his father questioned. "I'll be fine. I'll load it onto a cart." "Dad, help me out," Mark replied, and his father agreed, saying, "All right, I'll assist you anytime." The safe weighed around 120 pounds, confirming my suspicion that Mark, despite his good looks, was not very smart. At that moment, I solemnly pledged to drag these people down to the depths of hell. They had not only betrayed me, but also ruined the precious moments I spent watching Luna, our cat. Witnessing my husband's infidelity through the camera was a painful blow. I had hoped to find solace in Luna's presence, but even she seemed scared and wouldn't show up. These people had shattered my peace, but I vowed to punish them severely. One day, while I was working, I activated the pet camera once again. This time, it wasn't the woman my husband was having an affair with. Instead, it was my in-laws at our house, discussing their plan to take the bank book from me. With determination in my heart, I continued to gather evidence, and soon the day would come when I would execute my plan and show them the consequences of underestimating me. Facing the reality of my impending divorce, I found myself strangely accepting of the situation. Just how desperate were these people to go after money? I sat at my office desk, sipping coffee, and recorded the scene on my phone screen. Surprisingly, I wasn't upset or sad anymore. If they had such intentions, so did I. I was determined to show them the consequences of their actions. Then, the day finally arrived. "Hey, how much money is in that passbook on the vault? You always seem so happy when you're looking at it," Mark asked. "Right now, there's about $500,000 in there," I replied casually. The next day when I arrived home, I discovered a signed divorce paper in the living room. Both my husband and the vault were gone. A smirk formed on my face as I sat down to have breakfast. I acted quickly, immediately filing the divorce papers and contacting my son, Kevin. "Your father finally stole the vault. Can't believe he managed to carry it. It's so heavy," I told him. Kevin responded, "Mom, I think it's about time you end things with Dad. By the way, did he take everything in the vault too?" "No, actually, I moved all the money to online banking. The passbook is essentially worthless now. The most valuable thing might have been the safe itself since it was so heavy. Oh, by the way, I've already filed the divorce papers. Now I'm thinking about filing a police report. What do you think?" I explained to Kevin, who agreed and suggested that I should file a police report and hire a lawyer. "Right, a lawyer. I already have a private investigator on it, but I hadn't thought about a lawyer." "Thanks," I replied to Kevin. He seemed exasperated. Following Kevin's suggestion, I reached out to a lawyer through my private investigative contact. I handed over the recording from my pet camera to both the police and the lawyer, and then I waited. After a while, I received a call from my ex-husband, sounding quite frantic. "What the hell? The passbook is empty. What happened to the $500,000? You tricked me. That was my money. Where is it? Tell me now, or I'm going back to the house and abandoning your cat Luna," he threatened. "You just committed theft, and now you're threatening me. From now on, communicate through my lawyer," I calmly responded and blocked his number. I reported the incident to the police and sent the recording to my lawyer. It was a relief to finally take action. This was exactly what I had wanted to do. A short while later, I received a call from the police. "We have caught the thief. However, the vault was damaged. It appears he forced it open, and the things inside were burned," they informed me. My ex-husband and his parents learned that the passbook balance was zero, and they set the contents of the vault on fire. Although it was his first offense, my ex-husband spent a few days in custody. Discoveries continued as my ex-husband broke into the house he used to live in after his release. However, I had already filed for a divorce and obtained a restraining order. When he started causing a scene, I called the police, and within 10 minutes, they took him away again. I contacted my lawyer, explained what happened, and had him start the process of getting a restraining order. Furthermore, I asked the lawyer to sue for emotional distress due to his infidelity. The lawyer mentioned that we might not get much money from his broke family, but that didn't really matter to me. What I wanted was alimony. It seems my ex-husband broke into our house because he was discarded by his mistress and wanted to get back with me. His mistress promptly transferred $10,000 as alimony and seemed to have disappeared. It appears they split after the vault incident, realizing that when the money runs out, so does the love. My underpaid ex-husband, who still has $10,000 in debt, and his gambling-addicted parents seem to be struggling with their daily lives. He is living in an old single-room apartment without a bath, constantly quarreling with his parents. This information came from my lawyer. My ex-husband pleaded with me, saying, "I can't afford to pay the alimony. please reduce the amount. But I refused, telling him to stay away from me. If you're really sorry, show it with money, I said. If he had stayed with me, he had planned to end the remaining $10,000 of debt by the time he retired. But he fell for the sweet talk of his gambling-addicted parents-in-law. In the end, how foolish they all were. The $500,000 in savings was the accumulation of my hard work since a young age. I find joy in saving small change and updating the bank book. Now I will start a new bank book. I am living a relaxed life with my black cat Luna. My son visits occasionally and tells me about his girlfriend. This time, I am going to spend time for myself. I need to buy a new safe, one that's so big that a person can't carry it. Right, Luna? I am the happiest I've ever been. Checking my phone, I discovered 13 missed calls, all from my mother-in-law, Martha. Not again, I thought. As I pondered this, my phone vibrated once more. I answered, and Martha's voice, filled with anger, came through. "Excuse me, isn't the allowance for this month $3,000 due?" she demanded. "Excuse me," I retorted. "I'll send the allowance once this month's payment is deposited." Martha raged, completely disregarding my circumstances and only expressing her own desires. I had enough of her. Even in this situation, she didn't reflect on her words and actions. I felt I had no choice but to resort to my last option. I pulled myself together and bled out to my phone. "Your son has passed away, so I can no longer send the allowance. My name is Jennifer Smith, 32 years old. I'm a busy working woman at a major financial firm and also a housewife." I continued, "I got married about 2 years ago. I met my beloved husband Mark through our shared hobbies. He was kind to everyone, and I was attracted to his warm smile, quickly developing feelings for him. Apparently, he felt the same way, and after dating for a year, we immediately got engaged. We both believed that we wouldn't meet anyone better than each other. We were living together while dating, and without any major quarrels, we decided to marry. Everything went smoothly for us, but here's where a problem arose. Martha, my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away a few years ago, and since Mark didn't have any siblings, his only family was Martha. The trouble started when I first visited her home to introduce myself before our wedding. "Nice to meet you, Martha," I said, trying to be polite. She clearly showed a displeased expression. "So, you're Mark's fan, huh?" she said. "Yes, my name is Jennifer Miller." "You're a rather plain girl. I wonder what Mark sees in you," she remarked. I couldn't tell if she was joking or seriously meant what she said. Having such words directed at me by the mother of my loved one, I was quite shocked. Seeing my state, Mark frowned at Martha. "Hey, Mom, what's with the sudden harsh words? How can you say such things to the person I chose?" Mark questioned. "No, Mark. I'm just trying to choose a suitable woman for you," she replied. "Choose? I'm the one who chose her. You have no right to meddle. Don't say it in such a cold way. I'm just telling the truth because I care about you. If you were really thinking of me, you'd simply support us. Why can't you understand such a simple thing?" The air turned heavy as an argument unfolded between mother and son right before my eyes. Given that this was my first meeting with Martha, I wasn't in a position to intervene. Although the atmosphere remained awkward, we ultimately managed to express our intent to marry. As we were leaving, Martha called out to Mark, sounding somewhat disgruntled. "Mark, can I have a word? You're going to keep that promise after you get married, right?" "What promise?" Mark inquired. "You know about the allowance or that?" "Yes, I'll be sure to take care of that. Can we not discuss it here, please?" Mark seemed uncomfortable, and the atmosphere between my husband and his mother was tense, thick with discomfort in the car on the way home. I approached Mark to address the lingering concern that had been bothering me. "Hey, Mark, about the conversation you had with your mom as we were leaving," I began. Mark sighed deeply and began to speak slowly. "Yeah, I should have told you about it, Jennifer. I heard something about an allowance after my dad passed away. I've been sending money to my mom every month." "How much?" I asked. $22,000. $2,000? I couldn't help but raise my voice in surprise. Mark continued, "Actually, my mom has a debt. She lost a lot of money at a casino a long time ago. She's still paying it off, and because her health isn't great these days, she spends a lot of time at home. But she still needs money to live on." $2,000? Isn't that a bit too much? I questioned. If I try to lower the amount, she keeps calling me over and over. And no matter what, a mother is still a mother. I worry about her living alone. I understood that Mark was devoted to his mother. However, 2 months after our wedding, during my lunch break one day, I received a phone call from Martha. When I answered, she began to speak in a cheerful tone. "Jennifer, long time no see. Can we chat for a bit?" I hesitated before replying, "Yes, what can I do for you?" "You could start sending me money," she said. I was so taken aback that I couldn't find the words to respond. However, Martha seemed excited to continue the conversation. "You mentioned before that you're working for a financial company, right? That means you have a good salary, doesn't it?" she inquired. "Well, not exactly," I replied, avoiding eye contact. "Are you lying to avoid giving me money?" Martha's tone turned accusatory. "That's not what I mean," I explained. "But Martha, you're still receiving financial support from Mark, aren't you?" In response to my question, Martha defiantly replied, "So what?" I stated what I felt. "Martha, receiving $2,000 in monthly support is a big deal, and yet you're asking for more, really." Martha questioned, "If you were to send me an additional $1,000, I could avoid burdening Mark." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean by that?" Martha elaborated, "Well, I have Mark as a guarantor for my debts. If I fail to make payments, the debt collectors will go after him. Do you understand?" "But aren't you using part of Mark's $2,000 to pay back the debt?" I inquired. Martha admitted, "I'm short. I haven't told Mark, but I have a significant amount of debt." From Martha's tone, it was apparent that this was a fact even her husband was unaware of. Having children in the future would increase our expenses. Additionally, taking over Martha's debt was not an easy task. If Martha's payments fell behind and the debt fell onto Mark, the interest would likely have accumulated significantly by that time. If I refused to send money, it would eventually become a problem for my husband as well. It was better for Martha to pay off her debt now. Thinking along those lines, I reluctantly agreed to Martha's proposal. "All right, I'll start sending you money," I conceded. Martha seemed relieved, saying, "Really good, Jennifer. I knew you would say that. The total, with Mark's contribution, will be $3,000. But this means you can pay off your debt, right?" "Yes, of course." "I should be able to pay it all off in about a year," Martha assured. I pressed, "You promise, right? You'll make sure to pay off all your debts." Martha agreed, and I said, "I get it, so I'll be expecting it from this month onwards." She ended the call abruptly. Physical exhaustion from work, combined with this emotional burden, only added to my stress. $1,000 a month was going to be rough, but it was also to prevent future problems for us. After all, if Martha couldn't make a living, it would upset Mark as well. That night, I promptly reported the matter to my husband. He listened attentively and said I didn't have to do this, but I had already given my word to Martha, and it was a decision made for our future well-being. Mark expressed his gratitude and understanding, even as he maintained a sorry expression throughout. Time flew by, and 2 years had passed since then. The financial aid we thought would end in a year was still ongoing, and even now, we were transferring $3,000 every month to Martha. What's more, about 2 months ago, Mark fell ill and has been unable to go to work. He's on sick leave, so he's receiving disability benefits, but it's a mere pittance compared to his previous salary. Last month, I managed to transfer $3,000 to Martha from my savings, but it would be very challenging if this situation continues. Unbelievably, Martha has not once come to visit her sick son. We have told her about his hospitalization, but she doesn't show up to see him and only contacts me to ask, You're still sending the money, right? I was so angry that I decided to confront Mark about the issue. Mark, don't you think it's wrong that Martha is only concerned about money, even though you're in such a state? We need to think seriously about what to do going forward, I said. Mark agreed, saying, yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. I don't want to put more strain on you, Jennifer. This month, too, she's been bombarding me with calls and messages, asking if we sent the money yet. Are you serious? How can she only think about money when her own son is sick? Mark showed his anger at his mother, his face slightly tense. Then, as if he had an idea, Mark exclaimed, "That's it," and wore a sly grin. What is it, Mark? I asked. Well, this is our last resort. I've come up with something good for my mom, Mark suggested. What Mark proposed was a plan I could never have imagined. Although it could be called inappropriate, it seemed to be the only way to make Martha understand. A few weeks later, Mark was discharged from the hospital. Martha didn't reply to any of our messages, so we didn't tell her about Mark's discharge in the last 2 weeks. Martha's relentless demands for money had reached a point of absurdity. It seemed pointless to continue sending funds to a mother who showed no concern for her son. While Mark and I were enjoying a cup of tea, my phone buzzed with a message. Upon checking, I found 13 missed calls from Martha. As I pondered this, my phone vibrated again, signaling another call from her. Hello, I answered, turning on the speaker microphone so that Mark could hear. Martha started shouting immediately. Listen, where's the $33,000 for this month? Excuse me, that's right. The money for this month hasn't been transferred yet, I replied. I began to explain Mark's situation, but she interrupted, showing no empathy. I don't care if he's in the hospital or whatever. It's none of my business. You're working at a good place, right? You must have plenty of savings. Hurry up and transfer it here, Martha shouted angrily. Incredibly, she went on to say something outrageous. Listen, since you married Mark, if he can't pay, you have to pay me. Understand? If you refuse, I'll make you the guarantor. Got it? At that moment, something inside me snapped. She was openly displaying her desires without considering our situation at all. I had reached my breaking point. I firmly declare into my smartphone, Mark has passed away. I can't send you any more money. At these words, Martha blurted out, baffled, what? Yes, this was the last resort that my husband suggested, to lie to Martha about Mark's death and observe her reaction. If she showed any sign of sadness, if she reflected on her behavior and apologized, we would continue to support her financially. But if she didn't reflect, if she demanded money, we would cut ties completely. Deep down, I thought that even a money-grubbing woman like Martha would deeply reflect on her actions if she were told that her own son had died. However, the very next moment, Martha burst into loud laughter. Yay, what's so funny? I asked. Well, isn't it obvious? If Mark is dead, that means his inheritance will be distributed to me too. Excuse me, I've been looking into it since I heard that Mark was sick. Listen here, 2/3 of Mark's assets are yours, but 1/3 is mine. I was at a loss for words. I never thought that when she first heard her son was sick, she wouldn't look into treatment, but rather into how the inheritance would be divided. My anger surpassed. I was simply dumbfounded, and my husband appeared to feel the same way. As our eyes met, he slowly nodded, signaling to continue with the plan. I once again addressed Martha in a strong tone. Martha, did you hear what I said? Mark is dead. I heard. What about it? Aren't you sad your own son passed away before you? She callously responded. You just make sure to send me. I won't let you get away with not doing it, I exclaimed. However, with a click, the phone line was abruptly cut off, and a dial tone echoed. Glancing at my husband, I saw that he was visibly shaking with a face red with anger. Mark, are you okay? I asked. My husband looked into my eyes and said, I'm cutting ties with her. She'll likely come here eventually, demanding my money. Let's wait until then, okay? But are you really okay with this? Cutting off ties just like that? I inquired. Yeah, I have no regrets. After that call, she's no mother, my husband replied, his eyes filled with hatred, and I felt the same way. A person who only thinks about money over her own son's life is not family to me. A few days later, as we expected, Martha came to our house. For the time being, I decided to hide my husband in the next room and deal with Martha myself. She approached me with a face like a demon. Hey, give me Mark's inheritance right now, she demanded again. With that, anything else to say? He's already dead, isn't he? It's pointless to say anything now, I retorted. Yet you never even visited him. What are you saying? Are you really his mother? You're so annoying. Give me the inheritance right away. I don't mind dating a lawyer, Martha persisted. Speaking more would be a waste of time, I thought. Just as I thought that, my husband emerged from the next room. Seeing him, Martha let out a startled gasp, as if she had seen a ghost. Mama. Mark said, "Why are you dead? Long time no, Mom, sorry, but the news about my death was a lie," Mark explained. A lie? How could you be so disrespectful? Martha responded. I wanted to confirm your true nature, Mom. I was curious about how you'd handle the allowance if your son died. But you turned out to be a gold digger, just as I suspected. I got that perfectly, I added. What? How dare you call your mother a gold digger? Martha protested. Silence. I'm cutting ties with a toxic parent like you, Mark shouted. Martha's mouth was agape at my husband's angry shouts. She could not come to terms with the fact that her own son was severing ties with her. What? What does this mean, Mark? She stammered. It means exactly what I said. I can't consider someone like you as my mother. No way. What about the allowance? Martha asked, panicked. Do you really think I would? You're on your own with the debts. We're moving, Mark said firmly. Wait, please. If you do that, what about my living expenses? Martha tearfully pleaded, reaching out to my husband. He forcefully shook off her hand, looked at her coldly, and said, I don't care about your living expenses. You have been living off us without even a single apology. I really understand your despicable nature now. Don't you dare show up in front of us again. No, wait, Mark. Martha called out as my husband grabbed her arm and dragged her to the front door. He threw her shoes and bag outside and chased Martha out of the house. She made a fuss outside for a while but disappeared after a bit, perhaps unable to withstand the eyes of the neighbors. She tried contacting us multiple times, but we ignored all of her attempts. We set Martha's number to be automatically rejected, and we finished moving. Regarding the matter of co-signing for the debts, it became invalid since Martha had made Mark the co-signer without his consent, and therefore he was not responsible. Without the allowance from us, Martha seems to be leading a miserable life. It's only natural, as she had been using the allowance for her gambling habits instead of paying off her debts. She still has a mountain of debts and is chased by debt collectors every day. She can't gamble anymore and seems to be working from dawn to dusk. For the foreseeable future, it's unlikely that she will be able to pay off her debts completely. She will have to keep working until she is unable to move. This is entirely her own doing. As for us, we are spending fulfilling days in our new home. My husband's condition has stabilized, and he has returned to work. After some time, there's a new life growing in my belly. We're going to have an additional member in our family next year. From now on, we want to spend happy days as a family of 3. I'm Sarah, a digital artist by profession, and someone who takes solace in the comfort of my home. I take pride in both my creative work and my modest yet warm abode. This made the decision to marry a significant one for me. Mark, a confident professional working in a reputable company, appeared to be the perfect choice. Charming, intelligent, and hailing from a respectable family. Little did I know, appearances can be deceiving. The first cracks in what I thought was an ideal life surfaced during the wedding planning process. It became a constant power struggle between me and Mark's traditional-minded mother, Alice. She insisted on a grand, old-fashioned wedding with elaborate floral arrangements, fancy table settings, and uncomfortable family traditions. As the wedding day approached, anxiety set in. Despite my efforts to maintain a joyful facade, something felt off. Mark seemed distant, like a spectator at his own wedding. However, what truly stung was Alice's behavior. Stepping out of the car in my carefully chosen wedding dress, I felt her judgmental eyes scrutinizing everything from my attire to my complexion. In a cold tone, she criticized my dress, leaving me embarrassed. Mark remained silent, failing to defend me. As the day unfolded, Alice became determined to find fault in every detail: the music, the food, and even my 12-year-old sister's table manners. Attempting to intervene and defend my sister only led to Alice asserting that discipline starts young, as if I needed correction. During the toast, Alice couldn't conceal her disapproval, offering wishes for a joy-filled life that her eyes betrayed as insincere. Looking to Mark for support, I found none. He avoided my gaze, making me realize that the love we spoke of may have been a facade. It became clear that I was alone in this marriage, caught between a husband unwilling to stand by me and a mother-in-law determined to make my life miserable. Our wedding day, meant to mark the beginning of a happy life together, felt more like the opening chapter of a somber tale as we departed for our honeymoon. I clutched my bouquet tightly, using it as a makeshift shield, fully aware that more challenges lay ahead. The wedding, instead of being a joyous celebration, felt like a forewarning of the difficulties that awaited us. After a strangely quiet honeymoon, Mark and I moved into my house. Initially excited about the prospect of married life filled with love and happiness, my optimism waned when I realized that Alice, Mark's mother, considered my home a territory she needed to control. Within a few weeks of our marriage, Alice started making unannounced visits, asserting herself as if she owned the place. Each visit was rife with criticism and passive-aggressive comments, turning my once peaceful home into a battleground. One evening, I eagerly prepared dinner using a new recipe I had found online, hoping to share it with Mark. However, when Alice saw it, she wrinkled her nose and insulted my cooking skills. Despite my attempts to explain, she mocked me, and to my dismay, Mark sided with her. On another occasion, Alice criticized my living room decorations, claiming they clashed with the furniture. Despite the effort I had put into it, she made fun of my choices, and once again, Mark didn't stand up for me. Instead, he suggested that I could use Alice's help next time, making me feel like my home was being taken over. The painful realization struck me that the man who promised to support me not only allowed this emotional harm, but also joined in. Feeling utterly alone, I couldn't comprehend the depth of the isolation I experienced. Both Mark and Alice seemed determined to disrupt the peace I had cherished in my home. Hoping for improvement, I longed for Mark's support, and I naively believed that Alice might grow tired of bitterness. However, my hopes were shattered when one evening, Alice arrived at our door with bags and boxes, declaring that she was moving in with us. Shocked, I questioned Mark about this decision, but he seemed fine with it. As Alice began unpacking, treating her move as a final decision, I pulled Mark aside, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. I expressed to him that it simply couldn't happen. Our marriage was already strained, and Alice moving in would only exacerbate the situation. Mark sided with his mother, insisting that we needed to adjust to her presence. Frustrated, I questioned when he would adjust for me and stand up for our home and marriage. Mark avoided my gaze, claiming it would be rude to ask her to leave, and so, Alice moved in, plunging me deeper into my nightmare. Her relentless criticism extended to everything, from how I arranged the furniture to how I did the laundry, and even how I breathed. Mark remained silent, allowing her behavior to persist. Yet it wasn't just the constant nitpicking that wore me down. I stumbled upon a bag of prescription medications hidden in the kitchen one day, pills for anxiety, depression, and sleep disorders. When I confronted Alice about it, she became angry, asserting that I had no right to snoop around. Mark sided with her, claiming they were her private matters. It was a colossal betrayal, leaving me feeling numb. It became evident that Alice wasn't merely a difficult mother-in-law. She was akin to a predator, dismantling my defenses and seizing control of my life. Mark wasn't just distant or uninterested. He was part of the problem, contributing to the destruction of our marriage. In that moment, as I'd witnessed Alice's smug smile and Mark avoiding my gaze, I made a pivotal decision. I refused to be a passive spectator to this tragedy unfolding before me. It was time to take charge of my life, even if it meant distancing myself from those who were supposed to be my family. However, fate had another surprise in store for me, pushing me to finally put an end to the act my life had become. After Alice unexpectedly moved into my home, my life transformed into a never-ending nightmare. She scrutinized my every move, critiqued me for the smallest things, and her presence loomed over me like a dark cloud. Personal attacks became the norm, insulting my love, looks, intelligence, and even questioning my abilities as a spouse. One evening in the living room, Alice launched an attack on my career, or what she perceived as a lack thereof. According to her, a good wife should have a job, and she doubted I could do anything worthwhile. I defended myself, asserting that I did indeed have a job, and my income played a crucial role in our household. However, Alice remained unconvinced, questioning why we resided in my modest house instead of a grander one that reflected her son's dignity. Before I could respond, Mark, who had been absorbed in his phone, sided with his mother. He remarked that I could do more, and we could aspire to a better life. It stung deeply, feeling like a profound betrayal. Mark left the room, and in a hushed tone, Alice whispered, "He'll always be my son. You're just the girl he settled for." Turning away, I grappled with a mix of anger and embarrassment. As I gazed at our wedding photo, I pondered how my love story had transformed into a cruel drama. The nightmare intensified when I discovered an unidentified packet of pills hidden in the kitchen. Confronting Alice led to her anger, dismissing it as none of my business. When Mark entered the room, he scolded me for snooping, revealing there was no us in this marriage. Mark wasn't merely failing to protect me, he was taking Alice's side. I felt like a stranger in my own home, suffocating under their combined disapproval. Yet their actions fueled my determination not to be broken. I would endure this nightmare. Then, an unexpected opportunity arose. Mark's friend Jake invited us to a party, and despite my reservations, I was coerced into attending. The request felt more like an order, and we found ourselves at Jake's lavish house. The party offered a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere at home, providing a temporary escape from Alice's grip and the strained relationship with Mark. Laughter filled the air, music played, and for a brief moment, I could almost forget the daily battles and criticisms. As the evening unfolded, I found myself conversing with Jake, Mark's friend, and the host of the party. Jake's friendly and approachable demeanor sharply contrasted with Alice's cold judgment. We discussed various topics, and engaging in a conversation free from criticisms and insults felt refreshing. Jake suggested a party game, a welcome change from the toxic atmosphere at home, and I hesitantly agreed. During the game, I shared a story from the early days of our marriage, highlighting the challenges and lessons we had learned. The room echoed with laughter as I recounted some of the humorous mishaps we had experienced. It felt liberating to share a part of our story, even if only in a game. Afterward, Jake pulled me aside, expressing concern about my situation at home. He had observed the tension and encouraged me to stand up for myself, refusing to let them mistreat me further. His words were a glimmer of hope in the darkness that had enveloped me for so long. Over the next few weeks, as I pondered my life and the choices I had made, I came to the realization that I deserved better than the constant emotional abuse and the suffocating feeling of being trapped in my own home. With Jake's support and encouragement, I took small steps toward reclaiming control over my life. I began attending therapy sessions to build my self-esteem and develop strategies for navigating the toxic dynamics in my marriage. The journey wasn't without its challenges and setbacks, but my determination to break free from the cycle of abuse and regain my sense of self-worth remained unwavering. Over time, I engaged in candid conversations with Mark about the need for change in our relationship. It was a difficult process, but he gradually recognized the toll that Alice's presence and his own indifference had taken on our marriage. Together, we started setting boundaries and actively worked on improving our communication. The path to reclaiming my life was challenging, but it was a journey I was resolute in pursuing. With the support of friends like Jake and newfound determination, I began rebuilding my self-confidence and finding my voice. Step by step, I knew I had the strength to overcome the nightmare that had consumed my life for far too long. During the first half hour of the party, everything seemed okay. People laughed, clinked glasses, and music filled the air. However, as the night progressed, I noticed Mark growing more distant. He spent more time with others than with me, and when our eyes met, he seemed annoyed. Eventually, Mark disappeared, and my search for him among the guests proved unsuccessful. Turning to less crowded areas of the house, I heard a soft giggle followed by Mark's unmistakable voice. My heart sank even before I reached the door where the sounds emanated. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door to find Mark with another woman. They were oblivious to my presence for what felt like an eternity. When they finally noticed, Mark's face displayed annoyance rather than guilt or regret. He snapped at me, questioning my apparent lack of courtesy and knocking. Unable to contain my anger, I retorted, "Knocking? Are you serious? What are you doing, Mark?" Trembling not with sadness but fiery rage, I witnessed his face turn red, a mix of embarrassment and anger. He suggested we discuss it at home, but I was done talking. Unable to endure further humiliation, abuse, and disrespect, I stormed out, and Mark neither followed nor called out to me. I returned home alone, my mind racing but surprisingly clear. A line had been crossed, a boundary broken. The next morning, Mark acted as if nothing had happened. It was then that Alice, always ready to take advantage of the situation, decided to speak up. She criticized me for embarrassing myself and Mark. That was the last straw. I couldn't take it anymore. Embarrassment. You have the audacity to talk to me about embarrassment after everything you and your son have done. I shot back at her, fueled by months of anger and frustration. Alice threatened to call the police, but I didn't back down. "Go ahead," I said as I dialed my own number into the phone. "They might be interested in the package in the kitchen cupboard." Mark looked puzzled, then alarmed. But before he could say anything, the doorbell rang. As I opened the door for the police officers, a strange calm washed over me. It was as if all the chaos and pain had led to this moment of clarity. My nightmare was about to end, and theirs was about to begin. The police officers were professional but puzzled. They said they received a call about a disturbance, and I confirmed it, leading them to the kitchen cupboard. Inside, I showed them the packet of pills. Mark panicked and asked his mother what she had done. The officers turned to Alice. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us," one of them said. Alice stammered, saying the pills weren't hers, but the officer insisted she come. She shot me a look filled with rage as they took her away in handcuffs. I looked at Mark, who appeared to be on the verge of falling apart. "Is this what you wanted, Sarah? To break up this family?" he asked. I couldn't believe it. "Destroy this family?" I repeated, surprised. "Mark, you and your mom ruined this family long before today. You cheated on me, belittled me, and let your mom mistreat me in my own home. The damage was your doing, not mine." He stared at me, his eyes narrowing. "So what now? Do you want a divorce?" he asked. I replied firmly, "For the first time, Mark, it's not about what you or your mom want. It's about what I deserve, and yes, I deserve better than this fake marriage." Within weeks, we started divorce proceedings. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. During the trial, both Mark and Alice faced consequences. Mark was revealed as someone who enabled his mom's behavior, and Alice received a 5-year prison sentence for having illegal substances. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt a mix of emotions. Victory, yes, but also a deep sadness for what our family could have been. Mark avoided my gaze, and I realized the man I had married was a stranger. But I was finally free. Leaving the courtroom, I walked into the sunlight and understood that this was not just an ending but also a new beginning. In the years that followed, I focused on rediscovering myself and healing. Though the scars remained, they reminded me of my own strength, resilience, and self-worth. The nightmare was over, and the lessons I'd learned would stay with me for life. I have faced the worst and survived, emerging as a woman who would never again settle for anything less than what she deserved. I was taken aback by the unexpected news that Thomas, my friend, sold the house I inherited from my dad for $450,000. The revelation came with an oddly cheerful tone as he shared it over the phone from the hospital. To add to the surprise, he boldly announced that he's planning to embark on a trip with his mistress. The whole situation struck me as sheer madness, leaving me bewildered. I couldn't fathom why Thomas would sell the house with sentimental value and make such an announcement. The news about abandoning his family, including his daughter Elizabeth, was particularly shocking. Thomas expressed a nonchalant attitude towards leaving Elizabeth behind, stating that she had been getting on his nerves and acting high and mighty. His callous remarks about his own child enraged me. As I processed the shocking news of Thomas selling the house and abandoning his family for his mistress, a mix of anger and shock overwhelmed me. It felt like I might lose my mind. I felt a strong urge to intervene and prevent Thomas from hastily disposing of the house. My name is Lisa Johnson, a 37.5-year-old homemaker. Life with my husband Thomas and our 8-year-old daughter Elizabeth has been far from harmonious. Marital discord has been escalating for a while, with suspicions of Thomas's infidelity lingering for about a year. Despite lacking concrete proof, his behavior, such as frequenting bars after work, returning with a peculiar sense, and gifting expensive items not meant for me, raised concerns. I've been too afraid to confront him about his potential affair, unable to take any decisive action. Reflecting on our relationship, I recall the Thomas I fell in love with a decade ago. His kindness and sincerity initially drew me in, and our marriage seemed blissful. However, things took a turn for the worse around the time our daughter Elizabeth turned 1. Parenting became more challenging, and as a full-time homemaker, I sought Thomas's assistance with tasks like baths and meals. Yet his behavior and frequent outings began to change, leaving me bewildered about how our once happy marriage ended up in this tumultuous state. In the beginning, Thomas, perhaps aware of his role as a father, initially assisted with childcare as I requested. However, as it became a daily routine, he gradually developed resentment and stopped actively participating in parenting. He started expressing sentiments like, "This is your job as a stay-at-home mom. You should handle parenting on your own. What does a tired man like me have to help out after work?" Thomas's complaints were intense, leaving me and Elizabeth alone in the living room while he retreated to the bedroom. Dealing with Elizabeth's tantrums and struggling through the evening routine alone, Thomas's harsh words lingered painfully. His withdrawal from interacting with Elizabeth became more pronounced, even on his days off. When Elizabeth asked him to play, he responded dismissively, saying, "Playing is your mom's job. I'm busy." Thomas didn't consider Elizabeth's feelings, scolding her if she cried and blaming my parenting skills. To shield Elizabeth from his verbal abuse, we often retreated to our room and played together, just the two of us. There were times when I yearned for personal hobbies like reading or watching movies. However, living with Elizabeth around the clock left little time for myself, while Thomas indulged in his horse racing hobby. The situation felt unfair, but I couldn't complain as our household relied on Thomas's income. I felt a sense of helplessness and frustration as I found myself unable to change the circumstances that had persisted for 8 long years. Thomas's disinterest in parenting and his abusive language became a distressing pattern, a far cry from the caring and kind Thomas I knew before our marriage. Despite enduring this situation, I knew it was essential to provide for Elizabeth, and Thomas's income was crucial for our survival. One day, while drawing together, Elizabeth complimented my artistic skills and suggested that I pursue drawing as a job. Despite Thomas's contemptuous nature, Elizabeth had grown up to be honest, straightforward, and cheerful, the opposite of my more introverted personality. It was heartening to see her thriving at school, surrounded by friends, and even earning the favor of her teacher. Elizabeth's compliments about my drawings filled me with pride and confidence, reminding me that she paid attention to me and appreciated my efforts. I was grateful for her positivity, which brought joy to our challenging family dynamics. As long as Elizabeth could smile, I felt a sense of resilience in facing the challenges of our life. That quiet realization echoed in my thoughts that night. However, our household situation took a familiar turn when Thomas, in his usual inebriated state, stumbled home and collapsed into the living room. His drinking habits had escalated lately, becoming a source of increasing concern. Sighing, I began the routine of peeling his jacket off his slumped body. In the process, a piece of paper fell from a pocket that typically housed only keys. Upon closer scrutiny, it revealed itself as a receipt from a motel. Unmistakable evidence confirming the suspicions I had only held vaguely until then. In an attempt to conceal the turmoil within me, I quietly stashed the receipt away on a shelf as the night unfolded. I contemplated how to address this revelation with Thomas. The next morning, with Thomas not yet fully sober, he left the house after Elizabeth had gone to school. Engrossed in my regular household tasks, I found it impossible to shake off the lingering thoughts of the previous day's revelation. Having suspected Thomas's infidelity without concrete evidence, the receipt presented a dilemma. It became challenging to ignore the truth and maintain the facade of a masked couple. I felt compelled to confront him, seek an admission, and perhaps an apology within the upcoming week or even days. Lost in contemplation, my smartphone interrupted my thoughts with an unexpected vibration. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen, triggering a sense of apprehension as I answered the call. The caller identified themselves as someone from General Hospital delivering news about Thomas. He had been rushed to the hospital by ambulance and was undergoing surgery for a kidney disease. The doctor explained that Thomas's kidneys were likely to fail, necessitating a transplant. Overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, the doctor asked if I was all right. Despite the complex emotions, I found myself agreeing. As the doctor elaborated on the details of the transplant surgery, my mind swirled with confusion. Although Thomas had often mocked me and been unfaithful, I didn't wish for him to lose his life. That night, I held on to the hope for Thomas's recovery. My thoughts centered around his impending transplant surgery. As weeks passed, news about potential kidney transplant candidates within the family emerged. Surprisingly, I turned out to be the best match. The revelation that I was a compatible donor for Thomas, despite the challenges in our relationship, presented an unexpected twist in our story. The situation became more complex with the presence of Thomas's parents, who were still alive. The impending decision about organ donation required careful consideration, blending the threads of our troubled history with the possibility of a renewed connection through the transplant process. Despite my own less than perfect health, I emerged as the most suitable donor for Thomas's kidney transplant due to our matching blood types and the fact that he was an only child. Admittedly, I had reservations about undergoing the surgery, but the prospect of preserving Thomas's life overshadowed any hesitations. Recognizing the irreplaceable value of Thomas's existence, I made the difficult decision to be his kidney donor. When I shared Thomas's medical condition and our upcoming transplant surgery with Elizabeth, she responded with understanding and encouragement, sending me off with her blessing. Elizabeth stayed with my in-laws during my hospitalization, and despite their own health challenges, they were able to care for Elizabeth, who happily stayed with them, sharing a close bond with her grandparents. This arrangement provided me with a sense of relief, knowing that Elizabeth was in good hands. With that reassurance, I faced the kidney transplant surgery a week later. After completing the necessary health checks and signing consent forms, I donated my kidney to Thomas. The surgery, to my surprise, concluded more swiftly than anticipated. I spent approximately a week in the hospital, while Thomas's recovery extended to 10 days. Fortunately, there were no complications, and the recovery process proceeded smoothly. Just before my scheduled discharge, I received an unexpected call that sent a shiver down my spine. Answering the phone, I was met with Thomas's voice, the recipient of my kidney. Expecting words of gratitude for the life-saving donation, I inquired about his well-being after the surgery. However, Thomas's response took an unforeseen turn as he shifted the conversation to our house. In an inappropriately cheerful tone, he disclosed that he had sold our house for $450,000 and intended to embark on a trip with his mistress. The news struck me like a bolt of lightning, and I couldn't comprehend the audacity of his actions. The house, a precious inheritance from my father, was being callously disposed of, and Thomas's brazen declaration of having a mistress added another layer of shock in the midst of my disbelief. I confronted him about Elizabeth's well-being, only to be met with indifference. Thomas callously dismissed any concerns for our daughter, stating that he didn't care and was leaving her behind. The revelation left me enraged and appalled. The thought of him selling the house and abandoning his own daughter was beyond comprehension. Determined to intervene, I realized that I needed to stop Thomas from hastily relinquishing the house. As the call abruptly ended, my mind swirled with turmoil. I was left grappling with the shocking news of Thomas's actions and contemplating how to prevent him from following through with his impulsive decisions. The urgency to protect our home and Elizabeth's well-being became a pressing matter that demanded immediate attention. Trying to comprehend the sudden upheaval caused by Thomas's actions, I found myself unable to believe that he had sold our house, especially while he was in the hospital. The shock of this revelation worsened my condition, leading to an extension of my hospital stay. Feeling helpless and distressed, I spent days on the hospital bed contemplating the next steps. My first instinct was to call Elizabeth. Without the house, we would have nowhere to go. Despite my anger towards Thomas's bold declaration about his mistress, my primary concern was Elizabeth's well-being. Calling my in-laws home, Elizabeth answered the phone, and I anxiously questioned her about how she was doing and whether she felt lonely. I also mentioned the news about our house being sold by Dad. Elizabeth's response was unexpectedly reassuring. She calmly assured me that she had taken care of things. Intrigued and puzzled by her words, I listened as she explained that Dad had told her he asked his mistress to sell the house. Elizabeth had navigated through this unexpected turn of events, leaving me surprised and proud of her maturity. She reassured me that everything was fine, expressing gratitude for my concern. Encouraged by Elizabeth's composure, I allowed a bit of peace to settle in. However, curiosity lingered about what was happening with Thomas and his mistress at that very moment. Reminding myself of the importance of rest, I allowed sleep to claim me. After 3 days of recovery, I was discharged from the hospital and headed to my in-laws' house. Elizabeth greeted me with joy, and my mother-in-law smiled gently, expressing happiness at my return. However, my father-in-law wore a grim expression, apologizing for Thomas's actions. I couldn't fathom how Thomas had strayed so far from the values of his wonderful parents. Despite the apology, I took some responsibility, acknowledging that perhaps I should have spoken up sooner. As the conversation progressed, my in-laws revealed that they wouldn't let Thomas have his way. Intrigued and somewhat anxious, Elizabeth and I attempted to head home. On our way, though, we encountered an unexpected scene in front of a realtor's office. There, we witnessed a familiar yet disheveled Thomas and an unknown woman, presumably his mistress, engaged in a heated argument. Dressed in sweatpants with unkempt hair, Thomas was visibly distressed, while the mistress, wearing a short skirt with a single high heel and a bare face, expressed frustration about the house not being sold and the canceled purchase of $450,000. The chaotic scene unfolded before us, adding another layer of complexity to an already tumultuous situation. Thomas's enraged stomping and his mistress's screeching drew shocked looks from passers-by. Elizabeth and I, equally surprised, approached them, seeking an explanation. Upon questioning Thomas about his actions, he and his mistress were visibly taken aback, gasping in surprise. Accusations were immediately thrown our way, with Thomas suggesting that I must have talked the buyer out of the deal. Dismissing their baseless claims and instinctively shielding Elizabeth behind me, I faced their accusations. The realtor, confused by the unfolding drama, reacted with disbelief upon learning that I was Thomas's wife. The cancellation of the house purchase had disrupted their plans, and Thomas, pointing at his mistress, claimed to still have debts from the money he spent on her. It slowly dawned on me that Thomas' intention was to sell the house to settle debts incurred for his mistress and secure a new place for both of them. The realization hit me like a wave. Thomas was fully aware that the house was a precious inheritance from my father. To think he would disregard Elizabeth and me, attempting to seize my most valuable asset, was beyond belief. Anger welled up within me as I confronted Thomas. Despite the critical situation, he continued to hurl insults, displaying a complete lack of decency. I pointed out the audacity of him trying to sell my house without discussion, emphasizing that I was the rightful owner. My anger intensified as I questioned whether he had forged documents to proceed with the sale. Furthermore, I revealed a surprising twist. Thomas had been bad-mouthing the supposed buyers of the house, unaware that they were his own parents. The revelation about my in-laws' involvement came from Elizabeth, who had spoken to them about Thomas's misdeeds. Infuriated by their son's actions, my in-laws decided to intervene to protect both Lisa and their good-hearted granddaughter Elizabeth. Elizabeth stepped forward confidently, explaining that her grandparents were well aware of the house's significance to me and disapproved of its easy sale. In a strategic move, they had pretended to buy the house before anyone else could. Thomas, desperate and defeated, unleashed a vulgar laugh and lashed out at Elizabeth and her grandparents. However, Elizabeth remained unfazed by his verbal assault, and in response, I retrieved a piece of paper from my bag and thrust it under Thomas's nose, ready to confront him with undeniable evidence. The unfolding drama showcased the complexities of family dynamics and the lengths one would go to protect the ones they love. Brandishing the divorce papers, I confronted Thomas with a resolute declaration: I want a divorce. However, instead of acknowledging the gravity of the situation, Thomas snorted and scoffed, questioning my ability to live without him. Unfazed by his arrogance, I decided it was time to dispel his misguided assumptions. Determined to shatter Thomas's illusions, I calmly informed him that I had a plan. You needn't worry. I'm going to receive a lifetime gift from your parents, I declared. The mention of a lifetime gift left Thomas and his mistress bewildered. I went on to explain that my in-laws, recognizing their declining health, wished to give me a portion of their assets before it was too late. Initially, I suggested that such a gift should go to Thomas. However, my in-laws insisted that I, as the one who had given them a lovely granddaughter, were more important to them than a son who couldn't even express gratitude for a life-saving organ donation. Grateful for their generosity, I accepted the lifetime gift, leaving Thomas pale and agitated. Outraged by the turn of events, Thomas protested, calling it dirty and unjust. He threatened to take the matter to court, but I calmly reminded him that it was his fault for spending all that money, and his parents had made a justified decision. Dismissing his threats, I questioned whether he even had the financial means to go to court, highlighting the consequences of his past betrayals. Closing the distance to Thomas and delivering the final blow, I made it clear that every penny of compensation for emotional distress and child support would be sought. Unleashing a stern warning, I stated that if he couldn't pay, I would chase them to the ends of the earth to collect. Thomas, desperate and shaken, begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. Glaring at him with unwavering determination, I declared that I would pursue every avenue to hold him accountable for insulting Elizabeth and me. As Thomas and his mistress screamed and ran away, the realtor who had witnessed the entire confrontation expressed gratitude for the resolution. Acknowledging the awkwardness of the situation, I apologized for any trouble caused, ready to move forward with the next chapter of my life. Taking Elizabeth's hand, we headed home, and she expressed gratitude for standing up for her. A smile adorned Elizabeth's face, and in that moment, I made a silent vow to protect her for the rest of our lives. The divorce from Thomas unfolded without any significant issues, marking the end of a long-suffering marriage. Surprisingly, it was almost anticlimactic, prompting me to reflect on why I had endured everything until now. It became apparent that Thomas had invested a considerable amount of money into his affair and had resorted to borrowing funds from various sources. His mistress eventually left him, citing an inability to be with such a financially troubled man. Misfortunes seemed to converge for Thomas as his company had to cut back on staff due to a decrease in sales caused by material shortages. Working in the factory, Thomas was among the first to be laid off. While it may be inconvenient for him, it's challenging to believe he was laid off for no reason. It's likely that the company let go of those who underperformed or had poor conduct, which might have been the case for Thomas, given his demeanor at home. Now unemployed, he is scraping by with part-time jobs, lacking the energy to actively search for a new full-time position. His life seems bleak, having lost his job, lover, and wife. But there's little room for sympathy. Despite my efforts, including donating a part of my kidney to him, Thomas made a mockery of me. It appears that karma has caught up with him, and he should focus on working hard to pay off his debt. As for me, I've started doing illustration work, utilizing the assets I inherited from my in-laws. Initially inspired by Elizabeth's compliment about my drawing skills, I have received positive feedback from clients who appreciate the meticulous and skillful nature of my work. The plan is to increase my clientele and work diligently to provide a better life for Elizabeth. I'm Karen, a 25-year-old employee, and 6 months ago, my grandfather, who raised me, passed away. Today is the day when the lawyer will open my grandfather's will, prompting my visit to his house with my sister Susan. Susan, 4 years older than me, is my only family since our parents passed away in an accident 20 years ago. Raised by our grandparents, we faced the loss of our grandmother to illness a few years ago, and our grandfather's health had been declining ever since. Concerned for him, I chose to live in an apartment near his house, regularly checking on him. "You're a grown woman. It's unbecoming to keep coming back home," my grandfather would say cheerfully. But despite his words, I continued my visits. One day, arriving as usual, I discovered my grandfather in pain at the entrance. In a panic, I called an ambulance, but he passed away suddenly. "Hey, what are you daydreaming for? At least prepare some tea." My sister Susan's voice brought me back to reality. "Right, the lawyer will be here soon," I replied, heading to the kitchen. Glancing at Susan stretching out her legs on the mat and yawning, I could still smell her strong perfume from a distance. "She's the same as always," I murmured as I placed the kettle on the stove. My sister had always been self-centered, dyeing her hair in her teens and hanging out with delinquents. She demanded money without working, causing trouble that our grandparents had to apologize for, leaving me to deal with the fallout as the quiet one. Even as an adult with no stable job, she drifted around, working part-time. I knew she had been asking our grandfather for money in my absence, finding the situation troublesome. If it weren't for the inheritance, I thought, interrupted by Susan's formal greeting to the arriving lawyer. "Ah, you must be the lawyer. Thanks for coming today," she said in her high-pitched voice. Rushing to join them, I thanked the lawyer for his presence, recalling his kind eyes that mirrored my grandfather's. The lawyer's badge gleamed brightly on his chest as we began the process after offering incense in front of my grandfather's portrait. He took a sip of the tea, marking the beginning of a significant and uncertain chapter in our lives. I retrieved my grandfather's will, a document entrusted to him while he was still alive. Its contents revealed that my elder sister Susan was to inherit $20 million in cash, while I, the younger daughter, would inherit the house and the land it stood on. Upon hearing this, Susan burst into laughter, finding it amusing that she was to receive a substantial sum while I, the younger and supposedly plainer sister, would only inherit an old house. "It's just right for someone as plain as you," she remarked snidely. I retorted, pointing out that it wasn't just the house but also the land. She dismissed the value of the land in such a seemingly undesirable location, expressing a preference for cash. I couldn't deny feeling a bit shocked, acknowledging that perhaps my grandfather wanted me to protect his cherished house and land, where he spent his life with my grandmother. "Wow, a house and land. That's pretty awesome, isn't it, Brian?" my boyfriend exclaimed in surprise upon hearing my story. Shaking my head, I implied that it wasn't as great as it sounded, given that my sister inherited $20 million in cash. "More impressive, I'd say," I remarked, feeling a sense of emptiness as I verbalized it. Trying to be modest, I continued, even though I was trying to be modest. "Beautiful and having money, now she's the better," Brian remarked insensitively, earning a side glance from me. Realizing his mistake, he jokingly added, "Your comfort means more to me than money." Brian had been my boyfriend since I started working, and we met at a social event. Although he hadn't proposed yet, I had been considering marriage, and today was our first date in the wild. I ended up sharing details about my inheritance with Brian, thinking he might become my husband someday. Little did I know that I would come to regret this. A few days later, as I visited the family home I had inherited, I planned to clean and sort out my grandfather's belongings. The property was large, but the house was modest. Contemplating the idea of moving in and living here leisurely with a cat, I considered the absence of rent payments, despite potential maintenance costs for deterioration. I had been working hard and saving, so it shouldn't be a problem. Someday, maybe with Brian. Feeling embarrassed at the thought, I shook my head vigorously and rolled up my sleeves to begin cleaning. Just then, I received a call, and my sister's name appeared on my smartphone screen. "Sis, what's up?" "Hey, Karen, having fun all by yourself in that old house?" My sister slurred, clearly intoxicated. She always had a unique way of extending her words, but today it was particularly bad. "Since you're drinking, aren't you?" "It's still afternoon," I pointed out with a sigh, to which she exaggeratedly sighed back. "Oh, you're such a Miss Goody Two-Shoes." "I was thinking about moving here eventually," I answered my sister's question, hoping to end the conversation quickly. "Really? I'm enjoying a suite in a luxury hotel right now." My sister raised her voice, sounding somewhat exaggerated. "Guess who I'm with right now?" "I have no idea," I replied, finding the situation rather boring. "It's that kind of attitude that'll make Brian dislike you," my sister quipped. "What?" "I'm sorry, Karen." I was flabbergasted when Brian's voice suddenly took over the line. The sudden intervention of Brian threw me off balance, and dizzying question marks popped up in my head. I resented my imagination at this point. A disgusting scenario had been completed in my head. Surprised, "Huh?" my sister's mean-spirited voice chimed in. "Ever since you introduced him to me, I thought Brian was quite a catch." She went on to boast about how she had been attracted to Brian since I introduced him, how she knew where he worked because of me, and how she had approached him as soon as he left work. He came along readily when she asked, telling her that she was hundreds of times more attractive than me. I listened in stunned silence, unable to utter a word. "Karen, I'm really sorry," Brian's voice came again. "Tell me it's a mistake." I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. As a man, I had to take this opportunity. "I do feel bad about it, but come on, it's impossible to resist a beautiful woman who has $20 million, right?" The way he spoke, as if asking me to understand, drained my emotions away, and I felt a cold sensation, like my blood was being drained from me. "You know what? I don't need a man like you," I finally said, and I could hear my sister laughing uproariously in the background. The voice on the phone changed back to my sister. Well, that's how it is. And from now on, let's not consider ourselves sisters, okay? I wouldn't want you turning to me just because you're broke, she added before abruptly ending the call. Overwhelmed by emotions that had lied behind, all I could do was cry. It had been 5 years since that fateful call as I sat with a cat in my lap, dozing off in front of my laptop. The cat also peacefully slept. It was my day off, but there was still some work left from where I brought home. Oh no, this won't get the work done, I thought to myself, feeling guilty. But I had to gently move the cat off my lap. Just as I reached out to my laptop, my phone started to ring. An unfamiliar number was displayed on my smartphone. Thinking it could be work-related, I answered the call without any suspicion. Hello, Karen, long time no see. I instantly knew who it was and froze. The distinctive way of speaking was unmistakably my sister's. It's you, Karen, isn't it? I can tell just from your initial hello. After all, I'm your big sister. 5 years had passed, which should make Susan 34 years old. A smirk formed at the corner of my mouth at her unchanging way of talking. You're just the same. By the way, I came home, and there's a hotel standing. Did you sell a house? That's none of your business. Oh, come on. It's quite a grand hotel, huh? You must have made a good chunk of change, huh? Getting fed up? I was about to end the call when she started to chatter about her current situation. According to Susan, she had blown through the inheritance in about 2 years, and now she even had a considerable amount of debt. Even Brian, who she's still hanging around, seemed to be drowning in debt. I was speechless. Honestly, I couldn't care less. So, lend me some money, Susan requested, yelling. But I answered calmly, I've always wondered why Grandpa distributed his estate that way. But on the day you took Brian from me and cut ties, I understood. I started talking slowly, reminiscing about 5 years ago when Brian broke up with me, leaving me crushed. After crying my heart out, I sat dazed in my room, staring into space. I'm such a fool, I murmured, and large tears began to spill again. My gaze fell on a painting I had made as a child and had gifted to my grandfather. He had framed it and kept it hanging lovingly. Rising unsteadily, I picked up the painting. Grandpa. As I continued, my emotions swelled, and I started to cry. I recalled the notes my grandfather and I used to exchange on the back of that painting, like a family journal. Knowing that I was to inherit the house, he probably figured. I found this note. I'm glad I noticed, I said, shuddering at the thought that I might have left it unnoticed. I reached for a sheet of notepaper that had fallen from the back of the frame, with the note addressed to me. The date on the letter was just before my grandfather passed. I knew you'd definitely notice this letter. Right now, you're probably wondering why I distributed my estate in such a manner. I read aloud. Cash to you, a sister, and an old house and land for you. It may seem like I favored Susan, but that's not the case, the letter revealed, finally answering the question that had been bothering me. Despite any claims of favoritism, I wanted to leave most of my estate to you, bouqueted for me till the end. I finally understood what had been bothering me, and I continued to read the letter. But Susan would not be satisfied with a regular division. This child, even as her grandfather, I must admit, she's terribly greedy. Exactly, Grandpa? I whispered in agreement, though he couldn't hear me. She even took my boyfriend from me. That's what I want to tell him in my heart. That's why I arranged it this way, I read. While Susan may appear to have received the better deal at first glance, she won't pay attention to your share. According to Grandfather's letter, the value of this land in our area is continuously increasing due to ongoing urban development. As of the time I'm writing this, it's not worth Susan's $20 million yet, but the value of this land will surely increase in the future. As I read this far, my eyes widened in surprise. You can live here if you're attached to it, or you can sell it when its value rises enough to make a good profit. All I want is for you to be happy, Grandfather's letter had said. When I finished conveying the content of the letter, Susan clicked her tongue and said, Hag. I lived in that house for a while, but when my marriage was settled, I decided to sell the house. Just like grandfather's letter said, the land value had risen enough. Anyway, I'm never lending you money, Susan declared. But as if she had a good idea, she added, right. If you want, I can give Brian back to you. So help your sister. It's a good deal, right? At this moment, something inside me snapped. Enough was enough. You've been taken care of by my grandpa, and yet you haven't shown a hint of gratitude. I despise you for that, and you're not my sister anymore. Besides, I'm already married. I don't need Brian, and I don't even want to see his face. Stay out of my life for good. I said what I needed to say and hung up. I quickly set up call blocking, and my cat on my lap was cowering on the bed. I quickly picked up my cat and said, I'm sorry. After that, it seems Susan contacted Brian, and they both stormed into our old house. Did they try to return Brian to me? There's a respectable end there now, but they must have misunderstood something and were shouting that they were my relatives. Even though I just sold the land and had nothing to do with it, it's simple for those two. I sold the land, and an inn was built equals I must be the owner of the inn. Of course, the staff reported to the police. The two of them were arrested because they had destroyed several items in the inn. Furthermore, it was discovered that they had been committing marriage fraud for money in the past. It seems they'll be sent to prison together. I was also questioned by the police, but I was able to prove that I had no involvement. Quickly, as we were estranged, I was released. As my husband, who came to pick me up, and I were walking through the station, we heard screaming and turned our gaze. There were Susan and Brian, who looked completely different. Fortunately, they didn't notice us. Both of them had messy hair, worn-out clothes, and looked nothing like the two people I remember. Especially Susan, who never skipped her makeup and fashion, looked even more different. They were probably being moved to a different location. As I watched the two of them, filled with a sense of melancholy, my husband and I locked eyes. I grabbed the hand he extended, and we left the police station. Are you okay? My husband, always concerned, looked at me with gentle eyes. I'm okay. I have you and this little one. I touched my fairly noticeable belly and smiled back. In my belly, a new member of our family is growing. Money is important, but there's something even more valuable. That's what I want to teach our child, with my husband by my side.